Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a full-blown literary revolution. We're talking about Romanticism and how it was kicked off by two poets who just decided, you know what? The old rules don't work anymore. And they didn't just write a few new poems. They basically invented a whole new way of seeing the world. So, to really get what a big deal this was, you gotta look at what they were fighting against. On one side, you have neoclassicism, the establishment. It's all about reason, order, society. Very logical, very structured. And on the other side, the rebels, Romanticism. They were all about raw emotion, total freedom, the power of the individual, and wild imagination. It was a complete 180. All right, let's dig into this old guard of poetry, the neoclassical age. You have to understand, for most of the 18th century, this was pretty much the only game in town. This was a style that absolutely put the brain before the heart. So, if you wanted to be a poet back then, you had to follow the rules. You had to be witty, you had to imitate the ancient classics from Greece and Rome, and your language had to be super formal and polished. The point wasn't to pour your messy, personal feelings onto the page. No, it was to make clever, rational comments about society as a whole. But then, two young poets, William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, showed up and decided to change everything. They looked around and felt like poetry had totally lost its soul, and they had a really radical idea for how to get it back. In 1798, they dropped a literary bombshell, a collection of poems called lyrical ballads. This book became the unofficial starting gun for English Romanticism. And then, just 2 years later, Wordsworth doubled down. He added a preface to the new edition that was basically a declaration of war on the old style, arguing for a new kind of poetry, one that was rooted in everyday life and real, genuine feeling. So, what were the new rules? Well, here's the kicker. The Romantics argued that there shouldn't be any rules. They believed art shouldn't come from a rule book, it had to come from the soul. And it was Wordsworth himself who gave the movement its most famous definition. Let's break this down because it's so important. Spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Right there, that's the core of it. Poetry has to come from this huge, authentic burst of emotion. But then there's the second part, recollected in tranquility. The idea is that the poet doesn't just scribble things down in the heat of the moment. They reflect on that powerful feeling later when they're calm, and that's when they shape it into art. So it's both passionate and thoughtful. This new way of thinking was built on a few core ideas that just completely flipped the old ideals on their head. They said, hey, raw emotion is way more true than cold logic. They saw nature not just as pretty scenery, but as a living, breathing spiritual guide. They believed imagination was like a superpower, that the lives of regular, everyday people were just as epic as the lives of kings. And maybe most importantly, that a poet's own unique personal experience was the only thing that really, truly mattered. You can really feel Wordsworth's anxiety right here. He looked at the modern world, this hustle of getting and spending, and saw it as this corrupting force that was cutting people off from the guidance and beauty of nature. He truly believed we were trading something precious, something essential, for just stuff. Now, contrast that with Coleridge. Wow, this one line from his famous dream poem, Kubla Khan, shows a totally different focus. He wasn't just looking at a field of daffodils. He was using his imagination to conjure up these wild, supernatural, and psychologically intense worlds. This is poetry diving headfirst into dreams, and even nightmares. So it's pretty clear, right? Even though Wordsworth and Coleridge shared this incredible, revolutionary vision, they went about exploring it in very, very different ways. You could say they were partners in the same rebellion, but they were definitely marching down separate paths. And this table just lays it all out so perfectly. Wordsworth became known as the poet of nature, finding his inspiration in the real, everyday world. Coleridge, though, he was the poet of imagination, totally drawn to the supernatural and the fantastic. For Wordsworth, nature was a kind teacher, a guide. For Coleridge, it was this mysterious, powerful, and sometimes scary force. Wordsworth really grounded his poetry in the tangible world around him. He believed that the deepest, most profound truths could be found in ordinary experiences. Like watching clouds drift by, or listening to a farmer sing in a field, or, of course, stumbling upon a huge, vibrant field of daffodils. He had this amazing ability to make the simple feel sublime.
Coleridge, on the other hand, went inward. He used what he called his a simple plastic imagination, which is a fancy way of saying a mind that can shape and unify all sorts of different ideas, to build entirely new realities from scratch. He takes his readers on these cursed sea voyages and into mystical dream palaces, really exploring the strange and often unsettling landscapes of our own minds.
And you can see this divide even in how they wrote about nature. In Wordsworth poems, nature is almost always this comforting, healing presence. He calls it the guardian of my heart. But then you read Coleridge as the rhyme of the ancient mariner, and nature becomes this terrifying force of judgment that punishes a sailor for his crime against it. It's a power you have to respect and maybe even fear. Okay, so why are we talking about a 200-year-old poetry movement today? Why should you care? Because whether you realize it or not, their ideas are deeply baked into the way we think and feel about almost everything. When you boil it all down, the Romantics fundamentally changed the game. They're the ones who told us that our personal feelings are valid and important. They taught us to see nature not just as a resource to be used, but as something sacred. They championed imagination and creativity. And they insisted that great art can be about anyone, and that it has to come from a place of real passion, not from a set of rules. I mean, just think about it for a second. Our modern obsession with self-expression, the belief in individualism, the very roots of the environmental movement, the value we place on being emotionally honest, you can trace all of these ideas back to the revolution that Wordsworth and Coleridge started. Their ideas have shaped our world in countless ways. And all of this leaves us with one last question to chew on. In our hyper-rational, data-driven world of algorithms and digital noise, is there still any room left for that spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings? Or have we, just like the society Wordsworth warned us about, become so focused on getting and spending that we've forgotten how to see the poetry all around us?